everybody, this is Rachel from Blue Jane Creations, and if you are in this video, then that means you have purchased one of the card making kits that I put together for those of you that just wanted a little something to have fun with, or if you wanted to try it out, if you weren't sure that you wanted to get into it. I just wanted to show you how easy it is, the minimal supplies that you would have to have. So when I put them together, I thought it might also be fun to have a tutorial video if indeed you are new, if you've never made a card before. This might be a good way to kind of show you how easy it is to get started. And this way, if you don't like it, you've purchased an inexpensive kit, no harm, no foul. And because you purchased the kit, I wanted to be sure that if you took the time and effort to make that purchase, I wanted this video tutorial to be just for those of you that have purchased it. So again, thank you so much for supporting my small business. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you haven't already done so, of course, as they say, like, subscribe, or hit the notification bell so you can keep up on any videos as they come up. And I'll just quickly recap what was in your kit, what you should have received. I included 6 of these envelopes. They fit what's considered the A2 size cards, and that means it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 would be your card base. You know, when you cut the paper down and then you fold it in half, that makes the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So you received 6 of these, and I included 3 sheets of this white cardstock. This is what I'll show you. You don't have to use white for your card bases, but I thought if we're going to do this, might as well start at the beginning, like where I started. So it's just plain white cardstock, and I will show you how to cut it down into card bases. And you could do it manually, but I'll get into that in just a second. So you would have received 3 8 1/2 by 11 sheets of cardstock. I included 2 solid colored 8 1/2 by 11 cardstock. And then I also included 1 patterned paper of 8 1/2 by 11 cardstock, or somewhere in that ballpark. There might have been a couple sheets that might have been a little bit longer than 11. I can't remember now that they're all put together. All I know is the paper, I needed to be sure that the papers fit, the big papers fit into those sleeves that I packaged them in. So these were your standard large pieces of cardstock, and we'll get to that in just a second. Then I included 2 smaller sheets of patterned paper that you could use to help build up your background. And you don't have to use all of these. The 3 sheets of white cardstock would get you 6 card bases out of those 3 papers. And again, in a little minute, I'll show you how you measure it down to get your card bases. If you know, I wanted to keep this manual. I wanted to keep this kit as close as possible to the actual supplies, or types of supplies, I should say, that I used when I got started. I did not have a lot of anything, and it's been long enough, I can't remember exactly now how long. So I'm trying to take it old school to show you that you don't have to buy all the gizmos and gadgets to make a really nice, pretty card. So that's why I included these. And if you wanted to, if you didn't use all of it, you could certainly turn these into extra cards if you have leftover paper, of course. So you could technically get more than 6, but it's kind of the rule of thumb that a lot of people use in their tutorials, so I figured I'd just kind of work that same angle within my kit. So that would be all of the papers in the envelopes that you get. You would have received a self-adhesive ribbon strip. I included some form of embellishments. Some are butterflies. I think everybody had gemstones. But kind of a small idea that's rolling around in the back of my mind right now, even while I'm chatting over what was in the kit. I wanted to use these because I sort of have an embellishment and the gemstones kind of in one, and then I also have the flowers. I'm a big fan of these, I call them puffy flowers for embellishment. But you don't have to use anything other than the paper that I included in the kit. You can bring in stuff of your own if you wish, but I just wanted to get that little starter pack. So I included some flowers, embellishments, gemstones, so on and so forth, in addition to the ribbon strip. And I included so many sentiments for you just to kind of get a start. That way you've got something to play around with. I didn't have, for what I had in mind, I didn't have a pre-adhesive strip of ribbon on hand that I wanted to use. So we're going to do Let's Pretend. These little things, these are called peel-off strips that you can purchase from Love from Lizzie, and I'm not trying to promote it. We're going to do Let's Pretend. I'm only going to use one strip, same as the one ribbon that I had included in your pack. So I apologize for that, but it's really not all that far off from what I used early on. Because at the time when I started, Michaels had self-adhesive ribbon strips that they pre-cut down into packages of 4, and that's what I became addicted to. Love them almost as much as the flowers. And when they stopped selling them, I had to make my own. So in any case, enough on that. So the only other things that I will tell you that you would need to bring in are the following. Glue. I recommend something that dries clear and dries quickly. It doesn't have to be this. If you can't find something that's sort of a fancier glue, you can use pretty much anything, and I'll show you how to handle that so you don't oversaturate your paper. One of the things that I picked up as I went along, I typically stay away from using glue unless I have multiple layers where it won't show through. Otherwise, you do need to be very careful if you are gluing things right to the card base, because it will warp and damage the cardstock because it is wet, obviously. So I'll show you how to deal with that in just a moment when we get started. If you are using the glue, then I recommend something like this simple sponge. Just cut off a piece. You won't need the whole thing. I included, this is my Office Max Rewards card. Technically it's still active, but that's okay. The point being is that you can use it to press down the crease of your cardstock to help it lay flat. They call it burnishing if you're not familiar with that term. But once you get your cardstock folded, then you can take the edge of this and run it along the side of your card to even out that fold, make it flatter, and you're good to go. Nothing fancy. That's it. That's all you need to tidy up the edges of your card at the fold. Then a ruler, I do recommend any ruler. This is just the one that happened to be closest to me when I was putting the elements together when I started filming. And then obviously a pair of scissors. Now I'm bringing into, you don't have to, but for me, because my hands are not as steady as I would like them to be, I use this for cutting the longer strips or cutting out the card base from the cardstock. And then I use the smaller size for fine-tuning the edges. And again, you'll see in a minute once I get started. Because the first thing we are going to do is show you how to fold your cardstock. There's 2 ways that you can do it, and the dimensions still come out the same. It just kind of alters how they look once they're folded. So I'm going to set my ruler aside for just a second. And of course, sorry, also you will need a pencil to you just need to make little teeny marks once you've folded it, and again, I'll show you what I mean. Alright, so let me set this aside. You know, as much as I try to keep this desk clean, it is amazing how quickly stuff is like all around you. So as I just stated, I am using the white cardstock, and I'm only going to fold it one way when I do the actual cutting, but I want to show you the two ways in which you fold it to cut it in half, because it's going to change the markings of where you find the halfway point. So if I were to fold this widthwise and fold it in half, because it is 8.5, this would be the 8.5 size or side, then what you would need to do is come in with your ruler, and I'll do it without pressing the paper. I'll use this outer edge. So you line it up with, you know, the edge of the ruler, so you've got it lined up good. And then you would come in and you would find 4 1/4 is half, obviously, of 8 and 8.5. So you would just make a little mark with your pencil here at the 4 1/4 mark. Then you would come on the other side, the exact same side. Don't flip the cardstock, because then obviously you will have no way to line up your marks to make sure that you can cut it as evenly as possible. So then I would bring the ruler over here, mark it 4 1/2, and then we're good to go to start cutting. For me, myself, I don't know if it's just a at the moment thing, but I've really had fun going in the lengthwise, coming in this way. And I like this. I think my preferred fold for the card, I think of it as the book fold, where when I cut this in half and you compress the what would be the spine, for if we're going to go with the book analogy, then I call this the book format, or the book fold, because that is what it'll look like when you're done. So I'm just lining up my corners to get back on track. I will do my best. I am known to just be all over the place, so I'm trying to stay very focused and very concise here, since this is a tutorial for you guys. I don't think you need me yakking on all these little side stories, when the point is to show you how to do this with very minimal supplies, and of course as a concise step-by-step as I can manage. So now you see how I've used this to smooth down this edge, and it just crisps that edge, and it also helps this to lay flat, which is extremely helpful when you are making your marks. So I am going to line up, because now we're going to do this for real. So here you see it's 11. So on 11, the halfway point would be 5 1/2. So you just need to find your 5 1/2. You just make a tiny mark, just so enough so you can see it. Then I'm just going to turn it around, because what I mean by flipping it is you make your mark, don't flip it this way, because then obviously these two lines will never be able to sync up. So once again, at the 11 mark, then you come down, the halfway point is 5 1/2 for the 11. And again, because my hand is not the steadiest, when I'm cutting long sections, I'm just going to come in and cut this in half with my long shears. But again, you do not have to. If you have a nice steady hand, it is perfectly fine to use whatever size scissors you have. Because again, I'm trying to keep this extremely basic supplies for card making to show you what you can do. And hopefully I cut that good, because if I didn't, I will have to refilm. So I will have to double check in the playback of this video to make sure, did I cut this card? Because that's another thing I have to really work on, is keeping my hands in the frame. So I am going to try to be extra very aware of where my hands are. I've got it taped off, but that's not always a guarantee that I'm going to remember that I'm where I need to be. So as you can see by doing the little marks, especially if it's in an area that you leave open on your card, you don't have to worry about it showing. Once you erase it, you're good to go. Alright, so that's it for the measurement of creating your card bases. And this works with every piece of cardstock that you have in there in terms of the 8.5 by 11 if you want to use the colored ones for the card base. Same measurements apply. Let me look at these edges. I did pretty good. These are fairly straight. Yeah, I'm surprised. Normally they're like wonky everywhere. So, alright. Now we have our 2 card bases. And with any of them, you can do the book fold, or you can do the top fold. You can decorate your card in any of these ways. Now we have our card bases, and then one thing I would do is just take one of the envelopes, and you can just put your card bases in there just to make sure that the cut is even enough that these card bases will fit inside the envelopes. So there's one, and here's 2. And it's okay if they're a little bit smaller than the envelope, that's perfectly fine. You just want to be sure that you had an even cut on the edges where it could catch on the sides of the envelope and not go in. So we are good to go. And I'm only going to use one of the card bases today because, again, what I'm doing, I don't have to demonstrate on 3 or 4 cards for you to see all the basics and what you can do. And if you like it, you know, once you get started, pretty much the creativity starts flowing, you know, without even really realizing it when you're making the cards. So now I want to decide which card do I want to use to build up the background. So for this, I have the red polka dot, red and white polka dot paper, or I've got the solid black. So, I think to generate interest and show you how you can work the papers together, I'm going to go with this one, and I'll set this guy aside. And now we're going to get into the point I wanted to make about if you're going to use glue, thin, no matter what kind of wet glue you're using, a thin layer at a time is always the best. Because again, like I stated earlier, you don't want to oversaturate the paper. So I know I'm doing this offhand. I have my glue, and because this tends to, the glue will dry inside here a little bit and it'll plug it, so I'm just trying to get this set up ahead of time. But this is the glue. This is the Art Glitter glue. It dries clear. It's very fast. That's also something else to take into account. If you have a glue like the standard school glues or the tacky glue, you know, they have a billion different kinds, as we all know. Standard glues typically do not dry fast. This one, I believe, is designed specifically to dry faster. So by me using it, I will have to work a little bit faster to get stuff on there before it dries. Otherwise, I'll just have to put down another layer of the glue. So because this is going right onto the cardstock, I need to do a small layer. So if you have a piece of wax paper or parchment paper, you can just get a piece of something that has kind of a slick surface, or something glass, anything that you can use to dab some glue. So I'm using glue because that is what I started with. That's all I had available when I started. I knew nothing about using double-sided tape or tape runners or, you know, adhesive sheets or anything like that. It was just meat glue, paper, and whatever bits I had to decorate it with. So this is why I am taking it old school, because maybe that's all you have. Maybe that's all your budget could allow. That's all mine did at the time. So we just work with it, and we work with what we got. So now I want to decide, where do I want to start this background paper. So I'm going to start it roughly up here. So what I want to do is to make sure I'm doing a light coat so I'm not oversaturating the paper and getting watermarks on it. I'm just going to take a little bit of glue on the sponge and I'm going to dab it, and then, you know, and if you don't have it exactly where you had intended, in this case, it's fine. But that is the nice thing about handmade cards, is that they don't have to be. So, alright, now that I've got my glue, and as long as you have all the corners adhered down, it's okay if you don't have glue on every part of the paper. This again helps keep you from oversaturating the paper and damaging it or warping it, because the only parts that you really need are the corners and the edges. So now, because I'm going to be cutting a long stretch, again, like I said, you don't have to have these kinds of long shears, but for me, I just, for whatever reason, my hands just don't function cutting a long distance per se. So, and again, I will try not to be overly repetitive in things unless I'm making a point about what I'm doing, and try to keep the side chit chats for another kind of a video. So, alright, you can see just a little bit where in the shadows, see if I can get a good angle. Yeah, right there, you see that little bubble right here is where the glue is wet on the paper, and it won't detract from the card, but I'm glad it happens because it shows you what I mean in reinforcing the importance of start in little increments and add a little bit as you need it in terms of the glue. So when I'm done using these smaller scissors to come in and clean up the edges, then I can check all the corners, and I'll show you that. Okay, I think that'll do for our purposes here. Okay, so just slow and steady when you're doing fine-tuning cutting like that, because the problem came up because I was cutting it a little bit too fast, as I was explaining. So I'm just going to clean up this end and let me slow myself down. Just a little bit of glue there. So I'm just going around and making sure that the corners are tacked down. That's, like I said, the most important part, is making sure those edges are tacked down. So a lot of that could be popping up. Either I didn't have enough glue in the corners, or I didn't get it down fast enough because it was such a thin layer that it dried before I could get to it. Okay, so I don't mind that all these mistakes are happening while I'm doing this, because it also allows me to kind of work in a little bit how you work around errors or mistakes or things that go wonky, what you can do, so that way you're not losing any of the aesthetic on the card, you know, all the pretty that we're trying to achieve. So, alright, so we have our base, and now what I'm going to do is add another layer. And this is a textured paper. I'm kind of picking this on purpose. You know, I'm trying to keep it relevant to what we're doing now for the basics, but again, you may come across all kinds of paper types, and these kinds, it almost has a fabric feel to it. And because it would be considered a second layer, I can go a little bit more heavier on the glue to attach this, because when you have a texture like this, you kind of almost have to, because of the type of paper that it is, and it may need it because you have all this detailing you can see here. Sometimes these little dips in the paper can cause it to curl up, because it's not a flat surface. So just wanted to point that out. You know, I don't want to overwhelm you with side notes and things, but a few things are relevant as we go along for if you're getting started into card making. So, all right, moving on. So now I'm ready to do my second layer, and I'm trying to get an idea for what looks good to me. So you could bring it up close. I could put it up here. I could go at an angle to give it another kind of an aesthetic, and I think I want to do that actually. So again, I'm not really one for measuring unless I absolutely have to, such as I had to cut out the card bases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of gauge it. I'll have to kind of eyeball it, and it'll give me a little bit wider because I'll be using the sponge method here to start. Because I'm not entirely sure that this the nib on this bottle is going to cooperate. So I'm just going to stick to what I started with, and I'll just use the dabbing method of getting the glue on there. But again, keeping it in lighter layers so as to not overwhelm the paper and curl it up. So I'm going to come in at an angle and just bring it down. It doesn't have to be exactly the shape. I just need to be sure that I bring it down in the direction that I want the paper to go. And then again, I'm going to come across the angle or the edges, and then I can just fine-tune it once I get it down. So I'm not quite as worried about it being a slightly thicker coat than what I used previously. And I just have to work quick because of the glue likes to dry very quickly. Okay. Alright, so I think we're good. And again, once I trim the excess off, then I'll come back and check the edges to make sure that they're all secured, as it were. So, and hang on to your scraps because you can always do fun stuff with them. You can use them to build dimension, and I'll give you a small sample of what I'm talking about, of how you can use old cardstock to build up levels, I guess you could call it, on your card to give sort of a 3D effect. You don't have to have foam squares. You could grab some old cardboard that's lying around in your recycle bin, or anywhere, anything that you have that's cardboard that you could chop down would work for building dimension. But in this case, I have cardstock on hand, so that's what I'll use to show you what I'm talking about. So just a little bit, and I totally forgot. I was so involved in what I was saying, I totally forgot to come in with the smaller scissors. Because the big shears are kind of not really that great for the detailing, and it was hurting my thumb area. So, note to self, Rachel. Switch your scissors out. Let's not damage your hands. So I'm just going to tidy up the edges again a little bit more without doing any more damage to my edges. Okay. So now we have our second layer for the background adhered. And here we're going to start getting into the detailing. Now this is going to have a sentiment. And again, like I said, you could handwrite one in. You don't have to have pre-made sentiments, but I provided them for you just in case. So this is where I want my sentiment to go. So I'm going to take my ribbon strip. Remember, we're calling this a ribbon strip. And what I'm going to do is take it off of here. I don't think you really need to see me take it off of there. See me using it? Yes. We will definitely do that. So because I need to preserve as much of this strip as I can, I'm going to use it over here because it's also a really good way bringing in edging to disguise anything that's at a weird angle. And actually I need to trim that little bit right there. Let me get my small scissors. So it's a good way to build interest, but it's not going to make this card really thick, which in some cases, if you have to mail a card, I would definitely keep the layers very thin for this reason, because of course postage is going to be really, really expensive. Okay, so now I don't want to run the risk of damaging my paper. So I have accidentally pressed that all the way down. So now I have a choice. I could still do this and find something to cover it, or I can bring the sentiment here. And then I can use this little strip right here and bring it and finish out the idea or the look that I was going for. And then I just want to go through and make sure I press down the rest of it. So I'm going to trim the excess off there. And what I can do also, if I wanted to, and I think I'm going to, is take this piece right here and kind of run it out. Wait, that's upside down. Ha! Wouldn't that be fun? Okay, I hope I'm explaining this, but this video will be reviewed and redone if I am talking foolish. Okay, so waste not, want not. I have now used all of my ribbon strip. So now if I wanted to, technically, I could cheat my sentiment out, and then now I would have a complete border on either edge. But because I still have that little edge, and me being me, I'm going to bring it up to the edge of the paper. Okay, so let me move this out of the way. So if you're using your ribbon, you can put your sentiment down. You can lay it down without attaching it where you want it, and then kind of decide how you want to work with the ribbon strip or any other embellishment. It's kind of good sometimes to lay stuff down a little bit to kind of do a mock-up to see if you like it before you attach it, of course. So, okay, like I said, hopefully I am not rambling. So now we're going to get into the point. I want to raise this up. I want to lift this up off of the card, and I don't have any foam strips. So what you can do is take just a smaller, slightly smaller strip of cardstock, because of course you don't want it to show through, and I'm going to trim it to fit. And then I have another piece laying around here right next to me. Let me grab that and cut it down. And it's okay, like I said, if it's not perfectly to it, it's totally fine. But you want to be sure that the majority of the sentiment is going to be covered by that little strip, just so it helps prevent sag. And it doesn't have to be the same kind of paper, right? You can bring in some of the extra cardstock. It'll be the same thing. Nobody's going to see it beneath the sentiment. So that's a little too short. So we're going to go this way. And again, because I'm not fond of grabbing that ruler, you can always use your project as a backdoor means of, well, it's kind of wonky, but you know, I don't want to get bogged down with the details. I think you kind of feel the direction I'm moving in. So I'm going to finish this little strip out for demonstration purposes. And then all you got to do is you can do as many layers as you want. You just want to be sure that they're smaller than the sentiment size so nothing shows. Nothing shows. And one quick side tip before I attach this. If you see a lot of cards where people will run the edges, they'll put ink or something on the edges to kind of finish it off. Just take a permanent marker, take your item that you want to run the border around, and you just run it along the edge, slow and easy. I would definitely recommend. And you just go around all the edges with a permanent marker, or if you have kids, or if you have any just basic Crayola markers, you know, whatever you have on hand should work. So now it feels like that sentiment is a little more complete. Just that small detail with a permanent marker. I got this from the Dollar Tree, just as an example. And, you know, it just gives that little finishing note to the sentiment. So now I'm going to glue. I'm going to flip this. Should have dried by now, but I'll try to be careful just on the off side, or the off chance I should say, that the ink is still wet. And this you don't have to bother, I mean, other than accidentally dumping the bottle of glue on it, and I've done that not too long ago. Forgot I had loosened the lid and tipped it up with the tip, thinking, you know, I would just do the little dot, and it just was all over. It was quite funny. So thankfully that was not now, because what a demonstration that would be, right? Okay, so I was just getting enough glue out here to get that first piece added. And then again, just making sure you want to center it so you don't have sag. And then I'm pressing it down. Oop. Got a little stuck in the glue there. And now I'm coming in with my third piece, and I think I'll just do, or I'm sorry, the second piece. I'm just going to do 2 layers of the cardstock underneath, and it's just this. I'm telling you, this glue is just giving me what for today. It does not want to keep working. So let me see if I can get this on here a little faster before it plugs up again. It doesn't typically plug up this much unless I forget to put the cap on. So that might be some of what I'm experiencing, I guess. Because I don't want to keep taking the cap on and off while I'm trying to do a demonstration for you guys. So, alright, so now we got our layers, and this is dry, nothing's coming off on my fingers, because it'll tell you wet ink definitely will present itself pretty quickly. Yeah, this is just, I don't know what, man. It is not feeling the love today. So let me get this open. And hopefully hurry up and get this on here before it plugs up again. I might make it. Almost. Almost. Yep, I think I got enough. We're good. Alright, I'm going to get this puppy on there before it dries anymore, because it's drying real quick. Okay, so here we go. Here we go. Alright, so now my sentiment is in place. And we have the background layers set up. We got some detailing in there, and we have the sentiment. And then I think just to pull it all together for my aesthetic, I'm going to take the same marker and I'm going to go around the edges of the card itself to kind of pull it all in before I add the final touches with the butterflies and the if I use the flowers. So again, when you're working on the card base, I do urge slow and steady wins the day here, because I have messed up a few cards that I had to basically cover it and do something else entirely because it just went everywhere. Because I think I did point out a couple times my hands are not the most steady in certain circumstances. And this is one of them. So I need to be very, very careful. And then I don't want it. I'm going to do the two flaps individually just because I had that little tiny gap on the edges of the card, the flaps, I guess you could call it. That's what I'm calling it. And I'll do this. Oop, better get my pinky out of there. I'll have a black pinky. And then you will notice a slight difference in how the ink looks on the textured paper as opposed to the card base. Because it's two different types of paper, this is more absorbent. But to me, for my aesthetic, this does not detract. But by any means, you do not have to do this. Any of these methods is just a starting point, not a have to. Just to kind of get you pointed in the right direction. Hopefully I'm not being too repetitive in word choice, but I cannot stress that enough. This is not me telling you this is what you have to do. It's what you can do, you know, if you want to give it a go, and then you'll get a feel for it. If you enjoy this and you really want to pick it up, even if it's just for friends and family, doesn't have to be for crafting, because it was many years that I had already started making the cards for friends and family before I even considered doing the craft shows. So I wanted to tie that together, and I think what I'm going to do is go a little bit bolder. Now I may run the risk of messing up, but you know what, if I do this live on the camera or in this video, then it's perfectly fine. You know, there isn't a crafter out there that has not had boo-boos and overshot the mark, or, you know, anything wonky that can happen will happen. Pretty much guaranteed, right? But mistakes are a good way to learn. Mistakes can pave the way for something even better than what you were attempting to do. So now you see I did that a little bit darker on that edge, and you can see it closed that gap, so it looks, you know, you don't see that white gap so much anymore. Okay, so the basic part of the card is done. And now here for me is, like, I think my most favorite part is coming in with the embellishments. And the only other thing of note before I launch into that is being aware of how big are the embellishments, how much do they stand up. Because how high you can go will be dependent on the size of the envelope that you're working with. And for anything, I mean, I've used full-on silk flowers, like sunflowers, the fake sunflowers from the Dollar Tree. I just put it on the whole card. I loved it. But then I had to find either a larger envelope or I had to figure out how to make a custom. So in the beginning, I definitely recommend keep your embellishments down to a level where you can still put it in the envelope and close it. Flatter is obviously better for mailing, so that also needs to be taken into consideration. So I tend to recommend puffy cards or you know, a lot of detailing, a lot of flowers and embellishments, things like those those types of cards are good for hand delivery or putting in a package that you're shipping, as opposed to trying to have them run it through the mail. There's a few things that you could get away with layers, but really not much when it comes to mailing the envelopes. So just a small point about that. The next rule of thumb that we'll get into, I'm going to bring my little guys back up here. When you're doing the adding in embellishments and gemstones or anything like that, the rule of thumb is go in odds, go in odd numbers. Sometimes we can get away with an even amount of the embellishment, but it will depend entirely on what it is. To save your sanity, stick with odd numbers. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, that so on and so forth. And our eyes trend to focus better when it's the odd number of embellishments, and also putting them in a loose triangular pattern or triangle. And I'll show you what I mean here in just a second. So I'm going to pull off the ones that I'm going to use, and I don't want to fully tack them down yet to kind of get a layout, so I can kind of show you what I mean without belaboring the point per se. So you know, placement can be critical in where and how you place your embellishments. And here, as an example, this looks pretty. Okay, it's not bad. It could work. You know, it could. But I only have the 4 embellishments that they talk about. So with just the 4, it could work, but it's almost like my eye feels like what's missing, something's wrong, kind of. I mean, that's sort of over exaggerating it a little bit. It's obviously not that blatant, but so now when I come in with the 5th element, well, let me get one that doesn't look dirty. So now I come in with the 5th element, and it just completes that card. So now when I look at it, my eye feels satisfied that nothing is missing. So with the way I did the border, you kind of get that loose triangle. Well, it's probably more of an actual triangle, but this kind of breaks it up a little bit. So you have a triangle type flow, as well as the odd number that our eyes look for in the embellishments and things like that. So just another side note when you're decorating it, it could have been fine. I could have totally done this and gotten away with 2. That could have worked. But because for me, I love the, my favorite is along the detailing or the break in the patterns. I'm not sure if I'm explaining this clearly. This little bit might get blipped out in the editing. I'm not sure how horrific it sounds. I obviously have to get to the editing mode. But in any case, when I do borders with ribbon or the peel-offs or things like that, I really like to take the elements along that edge to kind of flow along with it. I don't know why, it's just something that appeals to me. You don't have to, like I said, crafting is extremely personal. You know, there's a few rules that are really good to adhere to, but for the most part, you can do, the sky's the limit, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to stick with that aesthetic. I really, 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 really like that. I just do. it makes my eyes and my heart happy. So now, since I like where it is, even though these little guys are tacky, I am going to glue them down, provided my little glue cooperates. Okay, I think we have some cooperation in doing these smaller details. So this does have adhesive. Depending on what it is, I tend to not trust the adhesive that these things come with to stick. I don't know if it's because I've had too many horror stories in the past. Could be. And since this card, because I'm using these puffy flowers, this wouldn't be anything that you could send through the mail. So if any of you and your kits got some that were a little extra larger, I apologize. You can by all means avoid using that one if it's too much for you to take on right now. But I just love my puffy flowers, and the bigger the better. I will get an envelope for it one way or the other. It's just something I fell in love with early on, and if I even had any of the cards from way back when, I would pull them out just to show you that this has been a long-standing trend for me, but they's long gone. They are. And I like to do them at different angles. I don't like everything being the exact same angle unless it's like I have to, depending on what the embellishment is. Because some embellishments you will need to do that. Just because they won't work if you don't. I've ran into that too, so this is the last little guy. So just using all the basic things, and I only had to bring in the ruler, the glue, the little credit card looking thing, my quote-unquote ribbon. Well, no, that was in the kit. The scissors, the glue, the little sponge, the little credit card looking thing, the pencil and the glue, and that's it. And now we have a card. And again, this is just a demonstration. I am not offended if this aesthetic does not appeal to you. I just wanted to show you how easy you can make a pretty card using just a small amount of supplies, and it's happiness. So you absolutely do not need to have to go out and buy a ton of the stuff that's out there. You know, obviously now as I'm moving along and building up my crafting career and expanding what I do, I have, but I could be perfectly content making cards with all this basic supplies, you know, on endlessly. But there we go. So I hope this video has been helpful. I hope it's been instructive for you to get started. Feel free to stop and rewind. If you have any additional questions or comments or something that you feel I missed, you know, or that sparked a question for you, put it in a comment below. You can always email me at bluejane69@gmail.com. And, you know, if you want more in-depth there, that's totally fine. So I think I covered all the bases. I did. I just want to be sure before I sign off. So no stress, no stress. Not a lot of money. A lot of these things I got from the Dollar Tree. That's it. I did stamping. Well, that's more high level. That's not anything I wanted to get into here. That was far too complicated. But I made sentiments with stamping and embossing powder, and then I just cut it down to a size that would fit the card, and there you go. So, you know, there's a million ways to do all kinds of things like this and not have to spend a ton of money. So, thank you again for watching. I hope this has been instructive. Feel free to put any comments, any feedback. I would appreciate it, provided it is positive, in tone and constructive. I don't mind constructive feedback as long as it's not negative and abusive, basically. So those comments generally do not get responded to. In fact, I think I just delete those. Thankfully, I haven't had any issues with trolling too much. So, but, you know, the more people come to your channel, then of course that's more opportunity for that to spring up. You know, my goal is to keep this a positive, fun place so we can share ideas and techniques and how to and things like that, and just build the community, because it really is a tremendous community. It has been so much fun, you know, meeting people per se and swapping ideas, you know, learning what they do, and hopefully they learn from what I do, because you could have 10 people with these exact same supplies and you are going to get 10 completely different cards. And I love that. You know, it doesn't matter what level you're at, there is always something to learn from everybody. You can learn from a newbie just as much as you can from a veteran card maker or crafter. So that is the joy for me, and I am very happy if in any way I have paid that back to you and made you see, yes, crafting and card making is something you definitely want to give a go, or, you know, this was fun, but it's not really my thing. You know, it's personal choice, so it's fine, and I appreciate you trying it out and watching the video. And yeah, so if you continue on this journey, please feel free to check out, of course, any of the other videos. And anytime, drop me a line, you know, say, hey, how's it going? It's all good. So with that, I will sign off now and get this into editing. And hopefully this version worked. But if not, you know what? It's no skin off of me to sit down and make another card in another tutorial, right? Because making fun, pretty stuff is never a hardship. So take care, everybody. Good luck on your journey. The YouTube Uverse or universe is at your disposal for pretty much anything you want to learn how to give it a go. So I will see you very soon in the next video, and I hope you have enjoyed this card making kit. Alright, talk to you guys later.